to NCHE's virtual conference breakout session, Building a Strong Historical Argument with National History Day, with Lynne O'Hara from the National History Day program.
Ted, thank you so much. Oh, sorry, go ahead. You're not done.
NCHE,
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Lynne. Welcome. NCHE would like to recognize the support of the sponsors which have made this virtual conference possible. And thanks also to the National Humanities Center for its partnership in this virtual conference and GoToWebinar for licensing support. NHC has a wide catalog of online and in-person opportunities for scholars and educators to collaborate. Please visit their website. We also encourage you to download the conference app, which has the most up-to-date information on the conference. And please take time to visit the virtual exhibit hall. You will find wonderful opportunities there for resources and connections. My name is Ted Green. I'm an NCHE board member, and I will be moderating this session. You may use the chat function to type your questions or comments during the session. Following this session, please take a minute to complete our survey. In addition to providing valuable feedback, completing the survey puts you into a daily drawing for one of our special door prizes. It is now my pleasure to turn this over to Lynne O'Hara from National History Day.
Ted, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your introduction. And to the teachers who are out there, man, I am giving you so much credit right now. I appreciate that you're here. You're here on a Friday afternoon. And we're going to have to get a little creative here. If any of you have seen me present before, I believe in interactive presentation. I hate talking PowerPoints. So one of the things that I want to do is to get you involved. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to find that question box. And in that question box, I'm going to ask you to type some things. I'm going to basically ask questions and have you answer them. And Ted's going to try to verbalize them. Now, I've done Ted's role on this. It's not going to be possible to verbalize everybody's, but my goal is to give you some strategies and to help you think of how you might do this with your students. So what I thought I would do, Ted, if I can have access to move the controls forward, please.
You should have it. I handed it over. Do you see it?
I do not have access to the buttons, unfortunately, that I had yesterday. Could you go ahead and move me forward, please?
All right, I sure will.
And keep going. Can we do one more? All right, well, thank you so much. Let's stop here for a second. I want to introduce myself. My name is Lynne O'Hara. I'm the Director of Programs at National History Day. I do apologize that Dr. Cathy Gorn was unable to join us, but our organization has blown up in the last 2 weeks, kind of like every other one, and she's unfortunately involved in a different meeting at this time. My job at History Day is to direct all of our education programs all over the world. At History Day, we are best known for our Keystone project, which is the NHD National Contest, where students do research. They create one of 5 different types of projects. They can write papers, build exhibits, websites, documentaries, or create performances. They compete at a regional level. Many of our students have been able to do that so far. They advance up to our affiliate level. For those of you who are involved in the NHD program, I need to give a quick shout out to our affiliate coordinators. More than 40 of our affiliate contests have gone virtual, some with as little as 2 to 3 days notice. Some of our affiliates are doing virtual regionals going into a virtual affiliate. And I'm really, really proud of the fact that they have worked so hard when so many of our students' activities have simply been canceled or scrapped to try to get them as much of the contest experience as we possibly can in these extraordinary times. We're also very fortunate this year at History Day to be working with the Library of Congress. We're one of their 4 new creation partners. And one of the things, this is one of these central concepts that we've been really working on at History Day, is this concept of historical illustration versus historical argumentation. Our students are very good at historical illustration. They're very good at saying this is President Kennedy, and here's a picture of President Kennedy. And most of the time they get it right. But one thing that kind of separates good History Day projects from really good History Day projects is building the historical argumentation. When I was a teacher, I actually would have on my whiteboard in the front of the room a very simple sign that said history minus argument equals encyclopedia. And this is something I would really hammer home to my students, that history isn't just a set of facts. There are a set of facts involved. People were born on certain dates, laws get passed on certain dates. People supported or opposed things for different reasons. However, what really makes the craft of history special is when we don't just accept the information as historians, but that we craft arguments and we create points of view. And it's that argumentation, creating things that you can reasonably disagree with or interpret in different ways, that separate out History Day projects and separate out 5 different books on the same historical topic. And this is a really tough challenge for many of our students. So what I thought we would do today is spend a little time and take a look at a couple different case studies. And this is where I'm going to get you involved here. I'm going to start off with case study number 1, which is the Indian Removal Act. And Ted, if you could move it forward. Our theme this year for History Day is breaking barriers in history. And I'm very excited about this theme, partially because one of our teachers actually suggested it. And what I would like you to do, kind of looking at this time period as our first case study, the Indian Removal Act, the 2 key Supreme Court cases, and the resulting Cherokee Trail of Tears. I wanted to see if you could go into that question box and pop some responses in of what are some examples of barriers that are broken if a student chooses a topic within this scope of history. And if you wouldn't mind to be so kind to share some of those out loud, because I don't have access to see them, but I'd love to hear what teachers are thinking about or what you think your students might think about.
And I am here waiting.
Oh, don't make me go 7th grade teacher. I know you have ideas. I know you can get interactive with me.
We have Mara, who's talking about breaking barriers and rights for Native Americans.
Okay. Other ideas? I was a 7th grade teacher. I am not afraid of wait time, people. Anybody else? Are we going to change the game? Don't stonewall me. Come on. Are there political barriers, social barriers, economic barriers?
I'm still here patiently waiting.
Oh, you're all killing me, aren't you?
There we go.
All right, here we go.
Sarah is talking about breaking barriers students have of not knowing and liking history. The tools engage them and lessen barriers right away. Annie talks about moral barriers we see now in 2020.
I think you bring up a really good point because we have to get past different barriers. We have to meet our students where they are, and we've got to push them. But when we think about history, one of the things we want to do is to get them to think about history through multiple lenses. So we want them to think about political barriers. So laws that are made, laws that are broken, questions about enforcing the law, or questions about enforcing decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court. I think we also need to be looking at different perspectives. We tend to look at this time period through the perspective of Andrew Jackson. We don't tend to look at it through the perspective of John Ross or other members of the Cherokee Nation. And oftentimes what we see when students are doing a project, and I'll use an exhibit board as an example, if we are doing a project on, let's say, the Indian Removal Act. And Ted, if you don't mind going to the next slide, please. I want to show you what many students go to as the next thing, and they'll talk about the Indian Removal Act, and this map will appear on their exhibit board or in their documentary. Now, what I like to do, I'm going to do a little exercise with this because I believe that history is doing. I'm not here to talk at you the whole time. So I want you to take a good look at this map. I'm not going to tell you too much about it. I am going to say, I know that you cannot read what's on the bottom or what's on the side. We're going to pass by that for now. But what I'd like you to do is take a really good look at this map and tell me some of the things you can observe from the things that you can see. I will admit, I do love working with maps. My minor at Penn State was historical geography, and I have a professor who totally got me into these kind of sources. And I think that once you really get students into them, they really get excited. So Ted, do we have any responses? Anything that you can observe of this map?
I am here patiently waiting.
I know this is so much more fun in person.
Mara talks about different tribes in yellow shapes.
Okay. We can see the names of different groups of Native Americans. We've also got different color designations. We'll come back to that in just a little bit. What's interesting about the title of the map? I'm going to give a shout out to Mara and Sarah, but I also know that there are 12 others of you here. I can see you. I just can't cold call on you, which I love doing. What kinds of things can you observe other than names of Native American groups and boxes?
Amy is saying all lands assigned to groups who are asked to move.
Okay. You are correct. These are all groups that had been geographically located east of the Mississippi River and are now getting pushed west of the Mississippi River.
Annie mentions, quote, assigned, unquote, to the immigrant Indians.
Yes, that's a really interesting word choice, right? Immigrants with an E.
Correct. Sarah talks about discourse analysis, lands assigned to immigrant Indians in the title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Amy,
oh, good. That word assignment is also really important.
Amy talks about the map showing rivers, and then again, emigrant versus immigrant.
Mm-hmm. Waterways are clearly really important because that's really the geographic feature that's highlighted primarily.
Mara mentions it's archived by Library of Congress in 1945.
That's interesting.
And those are the end of our comments. Sorry, Annie also says, can we zoom into the handwritten text in lower right-hand corner?
We are going to zoom into that in just 1 second here. Now, one thing that I think is really interesting that you pick up on is that we notice certain things, but I think it's really important when we work with students, we make sure they know where the map is zoomed into. So for example, it says that we are talking about west of Arkansas and Missouri. And Ted, if you don't mind clicking to the next slide, just a very simple map, juxtaposing maps with simple maps of what the nation looked like at that time is really important so that students know that we're talking about this area here. And when I look at this area here, this is the modern, or that was the territory that becomes the modern day state of what? I'm not going to sing it here, people. We're talking about Oklahoma, right? So this is Oklahoma territory. Now let's zoom in on some of the parts that are harder to see. So Ted, if you don't mind moving the slide forward, please. This is the box that appears on the right-hand side. And what you'll notice in the top left, you have estimated quantity of land assigned to the tribe who have immigrated have immigrated west of the Mississippi. And you've got numbers that measure acres for certain groups. On the upper right, you have approximate numbers of those who live west of the Mississippi who emigrated. So those who have come relatively recently. And if you notice, those numbers on the whole are not terribly large. We're talking for the most part in the hundreds. few groups towards the bottom were in the thousands, but for the most part, relatively small numbers. Underneath that, in the middle, you have number of Indian tribes east of the Mississippi, or the rough population numbers, and then the bottom set is rough population numbers west of the Mississippi. And here's where I would stop and ask students some questions. Obviously, I'd zoom it in, or if we were going to be here, I would have had this printed out and we would have started marking it up. I would have started asking, what's going on here? I would have asked, is this a good thing? Are these numbers too big, too small? What stories are being told? And I would also really drive students to think, whose perspective is this? Who is drawing this map? And what are they doing? And I would show all of that. I would also go ahead, if you don't mind, jump into the next slide to show some of the parts at the bottom that are harder to see. The part on the left and on the middle talks about the different colors, largely which treaties those went with. And the handwritten piece on the lower right talks about this being prepared at the Topographic Office Bureau in 1836, and it's signed by one of the person who we assume is the creator at this point. And if you don't mind moving to the next slide, we can talk about the information, because the Library of Congress is just a treasure trove and a terrible rabbit hole of all kinds of really cool research. This is a map from the US government from 1836 that's stored at the Library of Congress. And once I got to that point, this is where I would stop students and say, okay, what insights does this generate? Now that we understand the various pieces, let's go back to that big picture. I would also stop them and say, okay, what questions does this generate? And this is where I think you can really kind of help students ask questions. Number one, not just accept primary sources at face value, but start to ask questions about who's creating this? Why are they creating it? What's the purpose? What's the point? And if we can do that, that's really the difference between description and analysis. That's the difference between a National History Day project that says Indians were moved west of the Mississippi, map, to this movement west of the Mississippi mattered because this map shows the following social, economic, political trends. This map shows that this is a government-created map that has a specific purpose behind it or specific agenda behind it. And that, I think, is really, really important. I'm going to pause there and see what questions you have.
Lynn, Annie has a question. She said she's curious about how population related to acreage allotted per tribe.
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think that's a great way to integrate math. You can actually go back and run those numbers and see roughly how many acres there were to a person. That could give you a starter average. I also think this would be really important to bring in some of that geography. I would look up a little bit about these rivers, because we know that not all land is equal, right? You can't farm every piece of land the same way. And I would try to integrate some of that to say, okay, just because you have 40 acres per person that's there, is it farmable? Is it arable land? What kind of animals are living there or not living there in 1836? Is it possible to support this population on this amount of land? This is a world where this is an agrarian society, and we've got, there are a lot of challenges of life out on the Great Plains. It's not all Little House on the Prairie, as I used to tell my students. But no, I think that's a great question and a great way to get students thinking analytically. What other questions or observations do you have? I'll keep going, but please, I want you to ask questions because that's going to be really important moving forward. Okay, if we could advance the slides forward, please. One thing, actually, let's jump one more. One thing that I think is really important with students is to help them think analytically in stages. So one thing that I think is really interesting is that sometimes we expect students to be able to create a historical argument from the beginning. That's really not feasible. It's kind of like asking you to complete the physics problem when you've never seen it before, never done it before, and somebody just plops it on a piece of paper in front of you. Instead, if we could advance one more slide, sometimes I think we need to help scaffold our students. So we need to start with examples. I'm a big fan of the I do, we do, you do model. So sometimes I think it's important, and I would teach this with my students. In the beginning, when I would give them a segment of direct instruction, about 15 minutes or so, I would say, okay, you know what? I'm going to tell you my thesis up front. I'm going to tell you the argument I'm going to make. So I might do one with Andrew Jackson where I would say, okay, this is my argument. I'm going to project this up on the board and I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to use the argument today that Andrew Jackson's victory in the 1828 election and his subsequent actions as president broke political barriers, history day term there, that had existed since the nation's inception. Jackson's victory represented the triumph of the common man and the birth of what became known as Jacksonian democracy. Jackson's actions while in office, however, including his apparent contempt for constitutional principles, ultimately gave rise to the notion of the imperial presidency. Now, I think this is important. We need to help our students distinguish between facts, so things like Jackson did win the 1828 election, and then interpretations. So I'm going to make the case in this argument that Jackson did not follow constitutional principles and as a result, the power of the presidency under him did increase. So if I'm going to use this as my argument, and sometimes you have to use an argument with students a couple times, 2-3 days in a row. Then if we flip to the next slide, I might go ahead and project this political cartoon. This is one you've probably seen before, King Andrew I, 1833, from the Library of Congress. This is another example. Students will have a project about Andrew Jackson. They put the cartoon there. And oftentimes they put a caption under it, something about this is a cartoon about Andrew Jackson in 1833 from the Library of Congress. All factually accurate. But what are some ways we can help our students use this as a piece of analysis to support their thesis and not just a cartoon to illustrate their topic? And I'm going to turn that question back to you. How can we teach our students to use this cartoon and analyze it to support their thesis as opposed to plopping it on their board to illustrate their project about Andrew Jackson? What are some ideas from the crowd?
Mara says, have them start by using the Library of Congress primary source analysis tool to really see what is going on.
Absolutely. The analysis tools from the Library of Congress and the National Archives are awesome. I strongly encourage you to grab them, to use them with your students. Both organizations provide not only the organizers, but training videos and opportunities for teachers. So if you are not using those in your classroom, please, please, please grab them. How else? How do we get students to go beyond recognizing this as Andrew Jackson to saying, hey, why does this matter? So what?
Sarah said she'd love to do a zoom in and zoom out with the image, maybe leave out the words first, then layer in.
Absolutely. Getting students to focus, whether you break this into top third, middle third, bottom third, or left side, right side. I think zooming in and helping students read and understand the language is really important. I think there's also a lot of visual imagery you can break down. You know, there's a reason that he's wearing a crown and a robe and a scepter. And we have to talk about things like, hey, what would those fancy shoes mean in 1833? Who would wear shoes like that?
Annie says, quote, had I been consulted, unquote, quote, born to command, unquote, who today might use these as their hashtag?
Oh, I like that. Looking at these phrases and turning them into hashtags. These are the hashtags to a certain extent of 1833. I love that idea. And Annie, I'm so going to borrow that because I'm sorry, the best ideas in teaching are borrowed. So thank you for that. Other ideas?
Amy says looking at symbolism and choices made by the artist.
Absolutely. Art is not photography in that you construct everything. We all know that photographs can be constructed. That's a whole different talk. But I think looking at all the choices from the top to the bottom, from the foreground to the background, to the words that are there and the way the figure is dressed and the way the figure is drawn. The idea of caricature drawings is really interesting as a history side point. One other point, then we're going to move on.
Sarah says maybe even compare, contrast that with an image or portrait of a British king.
So put like King George III or one of those back to back, or who the current king is in 1833, and my European history is not good enough to know that off the top of my head. But I think that's a really good idea to help students see those symbols. Now, here's the key. What we want students to do is we want to teach our students to write captions. And writing, I have a whole thing on writing. It's not always about writing paragraphs and pages and books. Sometimes it's about writing a really good 2-sentence caption. And I would encourage you to work with your students. If this is my argument and this is my primary source, once we break it down and make sure they understand the art and the images and the words and the language, to then step back and say, okay, so what? Why does this matter? How does this show President Jackson breaking a boundary? And how do you support that using evidence from that image that you describe? And I think that's a really cool challenge. Okay, what I'd like to, if you don't mind, Ted, if we could please move ahead. I thought we would also take a look at the French Revolution. So if we're talking about French Revolution and breaking barriers, Ted, if you could move to the next slide, we have got to talk about the biggest barrier, the storming of the Bastille, or one of the biggest that students will go to. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start with a painting. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at it and throw in the question box things that you observe and questions that you generate or that your students would generate based on this painting. I know it's hard. We switch centuries, we switch countries, we switch courses. But what kinds of things do you observe in the painting? What kinds of questions do you have about the painting? Come on, I know it's late. Rally with me. You can do it. I know you can do it.
Annie says, love to compare this with scene from film 1917 and let students analyze.
Oh, interesting. So kind of crossing time periods, French Revolution and World War I. That's kind of an interesting tactic.
Amy says, lots of smoke. Who is fighting and for what reasons?
Mm-hmm.
Sarah talks about observations of smoke, musket fire, cannon, some uniforms, some common clothes.
Mm-hmm. So this is not one military necessarily fighting another military, like we see in, for example, the film 1917.
Mara says this would be a great picture to use to magnify the lecture where you only have kids look at one part at a time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is a great image to say, because you could really do this nicely in quadrants. What's going on? Where are we?
Sarah says students might observe and wonder about the architecture and stone walls, turrets, in contrast to other buildings.
A little architecture in there. Absolutely. Because a lot of students, especially younger students, when they see this image, they assume the Bastille is a castle of some kind. It's a castle of sorts. It's a prison. And why would you go and stage a prison break. So one thing that I'm going to encourage, and we can actually jump to the next slide so we can see a little bit of information about where we pulled this particular primary source from. But I think it's really important that we ask students not only to observe, but then to question and to reflect. I think it's really important that we take these steps with our students, because when we slow them down and we force them to analyze a source and not just identify a source, that's what helps students build and construct an argument. I do apologize that we're not all there in Cleveland, because I really had to kind of jump this, and I know this is way more fun in person when we can shout out ideas and I can draw all over a board. But what I thought we would do today before we shift to question and answer is I did want to send 2 opportunities your way that may or may not be useful to you as you are moving forward. First, I wanted to let you know that National History Day is going to begin offering a series of live webinars on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Time. We are working with some of our other large national partners to help support teachers. I know that many of you are in situations where you are going virtually, you might be going virtually, you might not be going virtual, but you might be going to some kind of assistant where you're teaching remotely in some way, shape, or form. And we realize that this is unprecedented territory. And what we'd like to do is leverage some of the resources and strategies. So if you check out National History Day's social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We just announced yesterday the first in our series. We're going to have a conversation next Wednesday about setting realistic expectations for virtual or remote learning. I'm going to be on there to talk a little bit about my experience with working with both teachers and students in remote learning situations. And our guest for the first week is going to be the Smithsonian Learning Lab to talk about some of the digital resources. Now, what I want you to know about these conversations, it's designed that we're going to present for maybe about 20 minutes, but we want to use the rest of the hour to take live question and answer from the audience. So we're going to talk about setting things up, potential resources, things to check out, because I know that you're being asked to move mountains in ways that you never planned. The second thing that I will mention, this is kind of the other shameless plug. One thing that we are working with in our project with the Library of Congress is we are developing a historical argumentation webinar series that is going to run this summer. The information about this is posted on the NHD website. So all you have to do is go to nhd.org/PD, as in professional development. On that page, you can learn a little bit more about this webinar series. We actually have a full scholarship for one teacher from every NHD affiliate to join us and complete this course live and potentially get graduate extension credits for it. All the information is there. So we will actually have 58 teachers from around the world, one from each of the states, plus territories, plus our overseas affiliates. The program is fully virtual, which means I actually feel confident that it's going to be happening and our schedule is going to work for this summer. But if that's something you're interested in, let me know. We're not in a regular setting where I can pass out information and hand out my card and give you information, but my name is Lynne O'Hara. My email is Lynne, Lynne, at nhd.org. And if you're joining us and would like a copy of this, if you would like other History Day resources or have other History Day questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. And I'm happy to share this and other NHD resources with you to potentially use in your classroom environments, whatever those might look like. At this point, I'll go ahead and wrap and transition over to questions. I'll be happy to answer about History Day, about teaching virtually, about analyzing sources and building arguments. Go for it. Any questions you have, I'm happy to take.
We have one comment. Annie said this was great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wish it were in person. I'm much better in person, I promise.
Annie, Amy asked, how do you encourage schools to participate, especially from low-income school districts?
Absolutely. What I say, and the first thing I would say is reach out to me if you have any interest whatsoever. I want to get you connected to your state, or if we use the term affiliate, because not all our affiliates are states anymore, but I want to get you connected to your affiliate coordinator. We encourage schools to participate. We know that our program is teacher driven. So what we do is we try to work with teachers to meet their needs where they are. So for some teachers, it means taking a program and embedding it into a curriculum. So an 8th grade program to an 11th grade program, whatever it is you're teaching. For some teachers, that's working with them to develop a history club or related extracurricular activity. Many of our affiliates offer special programs or opportunities to engage in specific areas and specifically want to target schools with high needs. I'll give you an example. I live outside of Philadelphia. One of our most successful urban programs is the partnership of NHD Philadelphia, which is a partnership between 5 different cultural organizations based inside the city. They know that the socioeconomics and the targets and the challenges of the teachers in those schools is significant. So they have actually built a regional program based around equity and access. They make sure that all of the students have access to all of the materials that they need to create their project. They create supports within the Philadelphia area. So for example, hours where students can come to the Free Library of Philadelphia to get support with their projects. They have a program through Temple University where they will send master's candidates, teachers out into schools to work with teachers and to work with schools. Now, obviously, our program is different in every single place. But if you reach out to me and tell me where you're from and tell me what challenges you have, I'm more than happy to try to get you introduced to the people who work History Day in your local area, and then also can help transition you and let you know about resources that are available locally. We work with teachers in every kind of school and every kind of setting. Another thing that we do at History Day to try to help our teachers is we do a lot of virtual training. So both free training, but we also have paid courses. So we have courses over the summer. So it's nhd.org/online education. So for example, we have an NHD 101 course that's designed to help you get it started in your classroom, and to give you access to master teachers and resources and things to get things started. So I'd love to kind of share more about that or give you more information. That might be something that will help you. That's something that I know a lot of our rural teachers really reach out and look for training in that way, because getting to live trainings can often be a challenge. But honestly, all of our teachers are going to have challenges getting to live trainings in the next few months. So that's just a couple ways, but please shoot me an email. I'd love to talk to you more about this.
Great, thank you, Lynn. Mara has a question. Any word on the status of the state, National History Day contests?
That is the meeting that Dr. Gorn is in right now. I can tell you that what you want to do is you want to talk to a coordinator in your affiliate. I know that more than the last count I had was 42 of our affiliates have committed to going virtual. For some, that is just the affiliate contest because the regionals have happened. For some, they are doing both regional and affiliate contests virtual. I know Massachusetts said, you know what, no regionals, everybody goes to states and everybody competes at states. We are faced with the same question mark and decision. An official answer has not been decided about the NHD National Contest, but that meeting is actually happening as we speak, and we'll hopefully have more information to put out in the next week. But one thing that I think is really important is that we are working really hard at the national office to make sure that in a time when so many of our students' activities have been canceled, that we give opportunities. As much as I know that virtual is nowhere near as good as a live contest, we give opportunities for our students to have their work shown, to receive feedback on that work, and to have that work celebrated. And I can tell you, I have been in meetings, 3 or 4 of them now, open to all of our coordinators. And we've had about 50 different people from all over the world online brainstorming, solving problems, figuring out how to make this accessible to the largest number of students in a really impossible year. So I give a huge shout out to our coordinators.
Great, thank you. Annie just wanted to give a shout out. She said Sam Flores and VMHC in Virginia is awesome. So lucky to have them leading our National History Day efforts. Amanda says Ohio History Day is virtual. A lot of the regional were virtual too. And Amy said, I appreciate the resources and exercises. Thank you so much. She'll be in contact. She is silent because her children are forgetting that she's working. So
I
apologies.
can understand where they're coming from. And I'll give a shout out to both our coordinators in Ohio and Virginia, and about I think 8 or 9 other affiliates are brand new coordinators this year. I am so impressed with the work they're doing. I'm so impressed with the way the coordinators are working together and sharing resources and figuring out the best ways to get student feedback. I know that Ohio is one of the states who made a decision on a Tuesday and ran regional virtual contests that Saturday. And I think that's an awesome shout out. So I will give a shout out to our Ohio and Virginia coordinators along with our coordinators all over the world, because trust me, none of them expected this, neither did we, but we're making it work. I would say if you have a question, please put it in. I'm not going to go until you go, but thank you so much for your time, for your commitment to learning on a Friday afternoon, for your commitment of all the things you're doing and worrying about your students right now. Know that we're with you, know that we're working with you. If you'd like to join our virtual program next week, I'd love to talk to you about it. And if you have individual questions, please, my email is Lynne, Lynne, at nhd.org. I'm sorry I'm not there to give you a whole bunch of free and fun stuff, but shoot me a note. I'll get you a whole bunch of materials virtually and hopefully help you moving forward with your classroom. Good luck to all of you who have students competing at the various levels. Usually I say I hope to see you in June, but I hope to see you in some way, shape, or form in our programs moving forward. So thank you and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, Lynn. We really appreciate your efforts. Amanda says Sarah in Ohio is amazing. Annie said thank you. And I want to thank Lynn and all of the participants in this session on behalf of the National Council for History Day. We're so happy that you're able to join us for this virtual conference. Just make sure you remember that there are session evaluations, and that's very helpful to NCHE as we plan our national conferences, and also so our presenters can get feedback. But thank you so much. We appreciate it. This has been recorded, and so you will have access to the session. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Ted, thank you so much. Do you have anything else for me before I go?
We are good to go. You did a great job. It was very interactive, Lynn. I appreciate it. You can tell that you've had lots of experience in the classroom. So
I don't care what my job title is. I'm still a teacher at heart and always will be.
Great, great. You take care of yourself. Stay safe and try to relax over the weekend.
Thank you. You too. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.